Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011. We're at the Marriott Marquis Hotel in New York City, and my guests now are Leslie Goldman, Senior Director of Major Gifts for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, and Casey Rotter, Manager of UNICEF's Next Generation, also with the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're working to engage young professionals. How do we define young? First, Casey.
Well, generations X and Y, but we specifically narrowed that down to between the ages of 21 and 40.
Okay, for UNICEF, that's 21 to 40. Leslie, why don't you start us off and just generally, how do we engage that 21 to 40 set? What are your general principles?
Sure. For us at the U.S. Fund, we had a real gap in our pipeline of building major donors. So when we're engaging generations X and Y, our mission is to engage future major donors. So those who can give individual gifts now or hopefully in the near future.
And just how does UNICEF define major gift?
Sure. For us, that's $5,000 or more. So some of this group can or does give significantly more than that, and others work hard to engage their networks to give at that level. And so we've formed a steering committee and a giving circle and 5 committees that really allow 21 to 40-year-olds to get deeply involved with UNICEF.
Okay. You mentioned Gen X and Gen Y. Now on Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio, we have Jargon Jail. There may be some people who don't know what Gen X and Gen Y is. So why don't we, Casey, you want to define those Gen X and Gen Y, please?
Off the top of my head, generations. Well, I'm a member of Generation Y.
Okay.
So
a proud member. I hope you're a proud member.
I think
so what does that mean?
I think they're actually now between the ages of 16 and maybe 30.
Okay.
But obviously for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF's purposes, we brought that to 21 to 30, and then I believe Generation Y, off the top of my head, is 30 to 40.
I think 46. That's how they're technically defined. So we've decided to focus that. But this group is generally mobile. They're well connected. They're committed to humanitarian organizations. Many of them are extraordinarily well traveled. They care about the world at large. So for UNICEF, they're important prospects for us to engage. And they also bring a lot of passion and commitment to something that they become involved with. So when we looked at filling our major gift pipeline, this was a group that we felt was important to engage now, because when you engage young people in an organization as their philanthropy grows, we want that to grow with our own organization. Now,
certainly the web is critical to cultivating 21 to 40-year-old major donors, but let's start elsewhere. Are there other strategies outside the internet that are cultivating 21 to 40-year-olds? Go ahead, Leslie.
Sure. I think that for us, we started with a very active core of friends of the U.S. Fund. So what we wanted to do was to bring them together so that they could be educated about the U.S. Fund, that they could feel like they were making a difference, and that they feel like they were bringing their networks together. So that's where our steering committee comes in.
And how are you, Casey, how are you bringing them together?
Well, we hold steering committee meetings, and then we hold programmatic receptions and events, and then we also have smaller subcommittees that kind of narrow in on specific areas, whether it's events or social media, and they give of their time that way.
Let's talk about, go ahead, do you want to make a point before
you were asking how we fundraise specifically from them, besides web, and one of the ways that we found to be really successful is that we have the group, the steering committee, we have 30 members who study different issues that are affecting children and choose to fund specific projects, so that we as an organization have many different proposals in different areas of our work, and so they'll vote on a proposal to adopt, and then it'll have a specific monetary goal, and a specific outcome as well, and then the group votes on that, and then fundraises for that project.
It's the committee deciding on their own.
Yes.
So you're really empowering these young volunteers.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to have the most passion for something that they've decided they want to do, right?
100%. It's been
instead of something you foist on them.
Yeah, it's been really successful, not only as an education tool, but as a great fundraising tool, because it encourages, they have a sense of urgency, and then also a sense of buy-in, that ownership over that specific project.
Go ahead. You want to say something?
Yeah, sure. The first project that they raised funds for was called Project Sprinkles in Guatemala, and that's providing micronutrients to children in need. And because of the success of that project, we were able able to take the steering committee down to Guatemala to see firsthand what they did. And so in terms of making them understand the mission of UNICEF, how we actually accomplish our work on the ground, and allowing them to tweet, to blog, to hold events, to get their friends together, that trip was really essential. And that all came from this project focus, where they'll choose a specific focus.
And I think it's important for people to recognize that your organization doesn't have to bring people to Guatemala. I mean, you could be bringing them to 14th Street in Manhattan if that's where you're doing your work. But you're bringing them and showing them, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think many other organizations probably have an easier time than we do, where most of our programs are in developing countries. Yeah. So we try to be kind of experimental and innovative into how we can bring the field to them. So we so often have conference calls with our field staff in the grounds that they're working in, or whenever they're in town, we hold receptions, more education, mission-centric education program.
Casey, what do some of the events look like that you might host? Maybe more social events.
Yeah.
So if an organization wants to engage this 21 to 40 group, what should they be thinking about in terms of events?
Well, specifically, we have 2 fundraising events each year, and then we hold smaller cultivation receptions as well that are more program focused. But our 2 fundraisers with ticket prices are our Masquerade Ball in the fall, which that kind of embraces, it augments our current existing campaigns with UNICEF, which is Trick or Treat for UNICEF is a big program we have. So this age group wanted to add to that, and they did a Masquerade Ball that kind of celebrates Trick or Treat for UNICEF, but for these specific age groups. And then we also have, every year, we have a photo benefit where we're showing photos from UNICEF's work in the field, and that's usually at an art gallery, so it kind of gets more of the different set of people to attend, and there's more education and program integrated into that, so they learn while they're viewing the images, and then all the images are also up for silent auction.
I'm going to guess that the 21 to 40-year-olds don't react too well when they're told what the organization would like them to be doing. And so that goes back to the point you made earlier about having them decide on their own what a committee is going to take on as a priority.
Yeah, and one of the things that they felt was important as we were building out UNICEF's Next Generation was this educational component. So they're invited to lots of events. They're invited to all sorts of social networking events for all sorts of organizations, and sometimes they'll come to an event, leave an event, and really not quite know what organization they were even benefiting. So the steering committee felt it was really critical that the programmatic aspect of UNICEF be part and parcel of everything that we do. So, for example, this photo exhibit has a big educational component. So we'll have wonderful photos from the field, from UNICEF's work, but also facts next to each photograph of something that children are enduring in the area that photograph is taken, for instance. And our steering committee is exceptionally well-versed in UNICEF's work. So throughout any of these social events, we'll hear very rich conversations with their friends about believing in zero, that's 0 children dying of preventable causes, which is a huge mission of UNICEF, and other fantastic conversations. So they're well educated, but they're also willing to be at these very social events and taking that mission out there for us.
Yeah.
And every single thing we've done has their buy-in, and they feel ownership over. These 2 events that we do each year came out of their ideas and their brainstorming, and so that really, by them driving them, it gets them motivated and wants to. Then they bring in their friends and they attend, and they feel very passionate about these projects.
Yeah. I hear a common theme about empowering them, having them decide what the priority is going to be, and then they'll be so much more passionate about it.
Exactly, and then their philanthropy will grow with us as well.
Yep. Now, Leslie, did UNICEF do research to find out why young people were leaving events and they didn't know what they were supporting?
I'm not sure if on that, but on the research side, Casey actually has her master's in fundraising from NYU, and while she was there,
the Hyman Center.
Yeah,
of course.
Exactly.
We have guests coming later. Doug White, Doug White?
Yeah, he was one of my professors.
Okay, he's been on my show, and he's going to be on today too. But he's been on for a full hour talking about one of his books.
Oh wow!
Sorry, Leslie.
Nice.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Well, Casey's thesis was on engaging generations X and Y in the life of nonprofits, but at the same time, she was working in the gift planning department at the U.S. Fund. So she had used UNICEF as a case study for her thesis, and
excellent.
Exactly. So the research comes right from one of our very own. So then she was able to craft her own job description using all of this fantastic thesis research and use that to craft this great program.
Casey, that's great repurposing of your thesis. Outstanding. Yeah. Turning it into a job. Outstanding. Yeah.
Thanks.
So you were at UNICEF while you were doing the degree? USC?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I was working in the gift planning department, and I kept on, in class, I was hearing a lot of organizations complaining about an aging donor base, and I was working in gift planning, so I was on the end of the spectrum, and so I was dealing with a lot of older donors.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, so I kind of started asking, what was our average donor? Were we having an aging donor base? And we found that our average donor was 62 years old. And one thing that UNICEF is really great at is instilling a culture of philanthropy among children. They grow up trick-or-treating for UNICEF, which is something I actually did when I was younger. And then we have Teach UNICEF programs in schools where you learn curricula about children in developing countries. And then we also have we're on campus clubs and high school clubs all around the country. And so I actually trick-or-treated for UNICEF when I was younger, and then was part of my campus club as well. And when I graduated, there wasn't anything for me to really continue to do to get involved, besides donate, which I did, but there's still not that action or that connection.
So the young cultivation can lead to future employment.
Exactly, and only so many people can actually get jobs.
That's right.
At the U.S.
It
Fund,
becomes a narrowing.
We had to find some other way.
That's right. So the pipeline gets narrower
exactly.
as it leads to employment. That's outstanding, though. Good. All right. So we haven't talked deliberately about the internet because I wanted to start elsewhere, but let's go to social media, the web. Casey, generally, how are you engaging 21 to 40s on the web?
Well, they're engaging themselves. So what we've done is we've launched, so kind of wherever, we've limited budget and limited staff time for this.
But
so
you set up an infrastructure.
Yes.
My voice just cracked like I'm a 16-year. See, we're talking about
younger people.
16 to 40, and my voice, I'm now pre-puberty all of a sudden. My voice just changed. Sorry.
So kind of where we see our shortfalls, we kind of employ the group to kind of brainstorm and figure out what we should do. So about a couple months ago, we launched our social media committee. So it's a subcommittee. It's run by a steering committee member and other Giving Circle members that are part of our Next Generation group. And in tandem with our web team at the U.S. Fund for UNICEF and our social media manager, they developed a plan for what Next Generation should do. So now we're on Twitter. You can follow us at UNICEF Next Gen. We have a great Facebook page, and a lot of their fundraising is done through the web. We have a UNICEF, if you go to unicefusa.org/Next Generation, that's our main page, and it'll take you to all the other pages. But they create their own fundraising pages as well, and then there's pages per each project that we're doing at the time.
Okay.
So it's really taken off. What's great is the group divvies up the work, and every month they kind of create a new plan for what they're going to do on Facebook and Twitter, and whether they're going to highlight a UNICEF program or an initiative that's going on at the U.S. Fund, or then they also celebrate each other and things that they're doing in their personal lives as well as for UNICEF.
I'm with Leslie Goldman and Casey Rotter. Both are with the U.S. Fund for UNICEF, UNICEF's Next Generation, and their seminar topic is Developing the Next Generation of Major Donors, one of fundraising's holy grails. You're listening to Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of this is not Next Gen. This is Fundraising Day 2011. Next Gen is coming in November. Let's continue talking about some of the social media properties. So you met, of course, Facebook, Twitter. Are you using Foursquare at all? Are people checking in at all?
We've kind of played around with that, not necessarily just for Next Gen, but for for our other initiatives in tandem with the Next Generation. So UNICEF TAP project, we haven't figured out where it's going to go necessarily yet, but it's definitely in talks.
Okay, Leslie, any consideration of an app for Next Gen?
For Next Gen, I haven't been involved in any of those conversations yet. Have you?
We have some. On our social media committee, there's someone who creates apps, so they've kind of talked about it. But we think we need to grow our Facebook and Twitter platforms first, before we kind of reach out. So we have a good network, and so we're building that now. And then in the future, that's something that has been brought up.
And the organization as a whole has developed some great apps, particularly surrounding Trick or Treat for UNICEF and the TAP project to raise money for a clean water program. So I think that as the organization gets more savvy on this, which they've done this year, we'll be able to really parlay that and use it for Next Gen. Okay.
And Casey, let's talk about the person who develops apps now. So he or she. It was a he or she.
She.
So she had an interest, but the organization doesn't feel it's quite ready for developing that, going that direction. How do you then
manage
that donor so that and so that they're not turned off, but remain engaged?
I think it's being straightforward and honest with them. Giving them the ownership. She's the co-chair of one of the social media committee. So I think it kind of, while she shot it out there, the group in discussing it kind of came down upon themselves and was like, it's really not the right time for this to be as successful. So I think just explaining the situation of where you are and bringing them into that decision-making power and kind of guiding the conversation so that they get there on their own has been pretty successful for us.
Leslie, you were saying earlier that people who are in the next gen are also invited to other events that are not next gen events.
Yes.
Right. So talk a little about trying to get the different generations to mingle.
Oh, sure. When we started Next Gen, it was really the end of 2008, meaning the economic situation had taken hold. We did not have much budget. So that meant that we had to look at what resources were already existing at the U.S. Fund, how we can tie in Next Gen to things that were already happening at the organization. We sort of lost initially the ability to craft our own events and such. So we've got a fantastic snowflake ball that happens every year in New York and Los Angeles, and many members of the committee have bought tickets at that event, but also they've engaged their parents to buy tables at the event. So that shows that they're influencing the older generations and their families to get involved with UNICEF. And we've got a lot of young people that take part in that event. We have a junior snowflake committee, and several key members of our steering committee came from that committee, so they had already been involved in that. We just had an incredibly successful event in Los Angeles called Playlist with the A-List, which was a amazing karaoke event with some celebrities, kind of thing you can only do in LA. And the committee out there decided to give the balcony to UNICEF's Next Generation because we have 3 steering committee members and a subcommittee out in LA. So they sold out the balcony, and that was a way to get their friends to come to a UNICEF event. It was a way for the organization at large to be able to sell more tickets and invite more people, but also garnered a lot of press for the event. And the Next Geners who come, they do a lot with social media to further promote the event. So that's been really a win-win, is those kind of connection points.
Kate, go ahead.
And the committees, the grown-up committees for those events, kind of provide their mentors for them. So we sent Next Gen members to those committees, and they learned, they came back, they were energized. They were like, this committee is amazing. We need to grow and become that in the future as well. And we also have our board's pretty supportive, so we're starting to create more mentorship opportunities from our board as well.
Are there any Next Gen members on the board of U.S. Fund for UNICEF?
Actually, just recently, we've extended an invitation to one of the Next Gen committee members to join the National Development Committee. So now, when there's a new committee formed for our national board or there's an opening, they will turn to us because we've got so many fantastic people involved and say, who do you have? We recognize that they're up-and-comers as leaders to the organization. Yeah, and our board's recognizing that it's the Next Gen members that are going to take their place as board members as they retire from the board, and they've been committed. We're actually scheduling some small breakfasts with board members and, say, 3 or 4 members of the steering committee to talk about what it means to be deeply involved with a not-for-profit, and that's that mentorship piece.
And mentorship, and including that board development also,
exactly.
Developing them, bringing them onto the board.
Yeah.
Leslie Goldman is Senior Director of Major Gifts for the U.S. Fund for UNICEF. Casey Rotter is Manager of UNICEF's Next Generation at U.S. Fund for UNICEF. Ladies, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So
It's been a pleasure. This is Tony Martignetti, Nonprofit Radio coverage of Fundraising Day 2011, New York City, Times Square. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony.